Hello, I'm Hovik Manucharyan, and today is day 19 of the blockade of Artsakh by Azerbaijan. As a summary, more than 120,000 people remain trapped in the Republic of Artsakh, and the only road connecting Artsakh to Armenia remains blocked. To talk about these issues, I have invited Karen Vrtanesyan, an expert on military and warfare strategies with a focus on Armenia and the region. Karen is also a co-founder of the website Razminfo. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
As I said, we're on day 19 of the blockade. There are continuing reports of shortages and depleted supplies. Taking a step back though, can I ask, in your opinion, how we got here?
Could you clarify how we got here, starting from 1991 or starting from 1998 or 2018 or 2020? Which one?
I think that's a good question. I think that maybe after 2020 and specifically in the last 19 days.
Okay, so after this so-called trilateral declaration, okay, or capitulation declaration. Okay, what we see now was quite clear the same second that the text of that trilateral declaration was published. So when you read there, you see 5 kilometer width corridor, etc., where, for example, is said that Azerbaijan guarantees the traffic over that corridor, through that corridor, and the Russians are controlling, Russian peacekeepers are controlling the corridor. So there is lots of talks now that Russians are obliged to guarantee the working of that corridor, but it wasn't in the paper. So we have the first question, and I even remember writing about this on Facebook the hours later, that what are the responsibilities of the peacekeepers? What's their mandate? Yeah. Yes, because usually peacekeepers appear somewhere based on mutual agreement of the all sides of the conflict, Armenia and Azerbaijan in this case. I am more than sure that Azerbaijan would never sign anything under any text saying that some third force, the Russian force, can apply weapons against them. So that's an open question until now. What's the mandate of the peacekeepers?
Right.
So whenever you have such unclear definitions, the same second you got problems, and it was just a matter of time that Azerbaijanis would exploit that, and actually they did. For example, they did the same in Khazabert in December, 2 years ago in December of 2020, attacking Armenian positions and advancing into the territory which was supposed to stay under Armenian control, and there were other incidents, fightings, etc. So also the most important thing about the trilateral declaration, and I want to emphasize, this is a declaration, this is not an agreement, this is not some international treaty, etc. It's just a declaration of 3 people, and it's even signed by 3 people. It's never been ratified by any country. So it's like something based on a trilateral agreement of Nikol Pashinyan, Ilham Aliyev, and Vladimir Putin. So what was never there was mentioned anything about the responsibility, like if one side doesn't do its part, what's about the consequences,
and in
who's
fact
responsible for them?
In fact, there was constant reports that the Russian side was trying to have an additional mandate signed, but there were reports that Azerbaijan would not agree, and the Armenian side blamed Azerbaijan. But I mean, wouldn't it be sort of very plain to see that Azerbaijan would never sort of agree to nail down a mandate, because that would mean it's not gonna, it would limit its maneuvering.
Another problem, which I think very few people ever thought about, even after the 44 days war, is that the government of Armenia, people elected to govern Armenia, that these people will throw away all the responsibility from them, claiming that like Artsakh Armenians, Russians and Azerbaijanis should decide for themselves. We have nothing to do with this. This is this is the most tragic part of our situation, because at this point people who were supposed to represent Armenia on international stage, people who are supposed to take decisions, very important decisions for not only Republic of Armenia but all the Armenians, all the Armenian citizens. And we know that people in Karabakh in Artsakh are Armenian citizens. And they just refuse to take any responsibility for anything, and they say it's none of our business. We often say that what happens in Artsakh is now a humanitarian crisis, even catastrophe, etc. But Vahe Hovhannisyan recently put this in a very in a very understandable way. A humanitarian crisis can be solved by humanitarian means, but this is not a situation that can be dealt with just humanitarian means. This is a political crisis which roots in statehood crisis in Armenia. Mm-hmm. So if the rulers of Armenia refuse to represent Armenian interests, we will see humanitarian crises, we will see military catastrophes, etc., etc. Because the people who technically are supposed to take all the responsibility to make decisions and to be responsible for them, they just refuse to do that. They, they are spending millions of dollars on holiday lights in the streets of Yerevan, but they refuse to take any responsibility. Yesterday, Nikol Pashinyan announced that he's going to give some more money. Bonuses, yeah, but I mean, that's nothing. People can't buy food. That money better be spent on, for example, international lobbying of this situation in different countries, for making people of other countries aware that beside the Ukraine crisis, there is also a crisis in Armenia, but no one talks about that.
In fact, the government of Warsaw just announced that, the local government of Warsaw announced that they're canceling most of the New Year celebrations, most of the fireworks, because of the crisis in Ukraine and because of the strain on the budget. It's going to be surreal watching fireworks in Yerevan if they happen.
Look, let's discuss a simple example. What could be done? Just using one small example. We know there's a shortage of medicines, especially for people with special needs who, for example, there may be like just one person who needs that kind of medicine badly. This may be a life or death situation, etc. So there is one small thing that can save a life, right? So let's say it's impossible to break that blockade. Let's say, okay, this can be done, for example, by sending weightlifting drones, heavy payload drones, right? Mm-hmm. It's not expensive. They are about like $15,000 or $20,000. They can take, for example, 2-3 kilos of payload to, let's say, 20 kilometers, and this is enough to at least to send the most necessary medicines to some families, people with special needs, with rare diseases, etc., etc. I know there are people like that, and there are even children like that. Okay,
Right.
Why wasn't this done? Why spend millions of dollars? I'm not exaggerating. Millions of dollars on Yerevan streets lights, on holiday lights, etc. All these decorations. And we have a crisis, and citizens of Armenia are under the danger of starvation, of the blockade. Yeah. So why nothing is being done? I mean, there are people who, individuals, some activists, etc., who are trying to do something, who don't sleep at night, who can't sleep at night, thinking that there are people out there, etc., etc. But the government of Armenia, they are doing some celebrations, some concerts, etc., etc.
Can I ask, what do you think is Azerbaijan's sort of plan minimum and plan maximum in all of this?
I think the plan maximum is get rid of the Armenian presence in the region in whole South Caucasus. And this is not only Azerbaijan's goal, but also probably Turkey's goal, and maybe Turkey is the most interested in this, because they understand that if Armenians stay here, then any power that would want to put pressure on them will support strong Armenian statehood. Okay, so the maximum program is to get rid of Armenians at all, by pushing us out, by doing some ethnic cleansing, etc., etc.
In fact, the former, I believe, foreign minister of Turkey, who was the author of the "no problems with neighbors" policy, just recently himself stated that Armenia is its weakest, and Azerbaijan and Turkey would do best to try to push as much as they can.
Well, when they say no problems with neighbors, it actually means no neighbors.
No neighbors, no problems.
No neighbors, no problems. Exactly. You put it. Yeah, it was right on the point. You nailed it. Okay. Look, since they declared that strategy, no problems with neighbors, they did exactly the opposite. They have problems with Iraq, they have problems with Syria, they have problems with Cyprus, they have problems with Greece, they had problems with Armenia, they have problems with Saudi Arabia, etc., etc., etc. And the more they trying to expand under the logic of their neo-Osmanism strategy, the more conflicts they have. That's natural, that's logical. And the more they talk about peace, the more wars they are bringing to their neighbors. Israel, they also have very strained relations with Israel.
Let me ask, I know you follow obviously military affairs closely. Some politicians and analysts, such as, for instance, Avetik Chalabian, have said that without engaging the military, without using the military, Armenia cannot unblock this corridor. Now, does Armenia have the capacity to do anything militarily in order to help unblock this corridor? I was thinking, you mentioned drones, I was thinking even manned aircraft, flying manned aircraft with supplies. Previously, maybe recording, and everyone can attest that doesn't contain any military cargo. But even besides humanitarian airlifts, what can be done militarily by Armenia today?
The thing is that Armenia could have capacity if Armenia had Armenian government. by Armenian, I mean politically Armenian, a government that fights for the Armenian interests. We don't have such a government, unfortunately. This is not an issue of some people, let's say government wants to do something, but they can't. They need someone to tell them how to do it right. No, it's not the case. We have a government which knowingly, deliberately is sacrificing Artsakh and probably other parts of Armenia, because Azerbaijanis have already voiced their appetites towards Armenian territory, and they warrant, nothing was said against that, like we are going to defend it, etc., etc., nothing like that. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you remember, on the last year, on May 12th, 2021, Azerbaijanis occupied Sev Lake, actually Ishkhanasar, mm-hmm. etc., and parts in Gegarkunik region of Armenia. They occupied those without a single shot. They were just led to enter Armenian territory. Armenian, I mean Republic of Armenia.
In fact, a villager near Ishkhanasar was the one who first reported to the authorities.
I remember it was in Gegarkunik, yeah, but it was something like that. A shepherd saw Turks on the territory of their village. So we actually, the first thing that should have been done, and I've talked about this also to your viewers, if I remember right, if I remember correct. The first thing that Armenia should have been done after the defeat in 44-day war was to rearm military, bring it back on foot, train it much more extensively than it was done ever.
Well, because at that time,
that's the issue of security is the most important one. Actually, the states are created to maintain security of its populations. If the state cannot maintain security, cannot guarantee security of its population, then it's a failed state. And everything was done in Armenia except for rearming, except for training the army after the war. So now, like speaking, I mean, yeah, I understand that Azerbaijan wouldn't do a single step, wouldn't go single step back, just, to ease the pressure, unless they know they are going to be met with military force. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that can stop them and send them back is military. And Nikol Pashinyan is doing everything so our military will never be capable of doing something like that. There are lots of talks about reforms. There are lots of talks about buying this and this, that. But if you start analyzing what is said, if you start analyzing situation on the ground, you see that these are just talk. This is just populism. This is just blah, blah, blah. That's it.
Well, I remember that when we were, a lot of us were raising the issue of resupplying, rearming the military. What are they going to declare everything that they do? So is it possible that Armenia is rearming its military quietly? Of course, that sort of, there was some doubt cast on that too, because a month ago, the Pashinyan government openly said, we have a lot of money, but we can't buy any weapons because they won't sell it to us. So now it seems like, we're not rearming the military because someone won't sell weapons to us. Is there any tangible evidence that Armenia is rearming, retraining? Have you been following any of the military trainings that Armenia is doing?
I haven't seen any large-scale drill, any large-scale, maneuvers, trainings, etc. I've seen couple of videos, stage videos, like with 12, for example, special forces personnel, but that's it. It's just a show. They show like the same. They show the same UAV taking off the ground, and we never see what's next, what's after that. Like the same drone, different videos, like all the time. We see, for example, we see lots of talks like we are going to have a NATO standard army, etc., etc. Nothing real is done towards that. We see, in reality, we see unprotected positions or not enough protected with bad trenches, yeah, with like badly made trenches, some protection systems, etc., etc. I mean, it's been 2 years since the end of war, and still in many positions, soldiers have to stay in tents, even during the winter. I mean, that's absurd. It's like 1991 when we didn't have an army, or 1992 when army was just, they were starting to create Armenian army. Like 30 years ago. It's like we returned to that stage.
Does this criticism of the army or our inability to arm ourselves also apply in Syunik? For instance, we know that that's the most vulnerable probably portion, and what Azerbaijani and Turkish military would target in case of renewed war. How vulnerable is Syunik in your opinion?
Look, Syunik is very vulnerable because the sole road connecting Syunik to the main part of Armenia is under Azerbaijani artillery reach, within the reach of Azerbaijani artillery, which is put on that Ishkhanasar part. Okay,
and able to be, I guess, also observed.
Observed and being hit by artillery.
Right.
So that's a serious problem. We can have another next humanitarian crisis in Syunik, for example. And by giving or presenting the part of the road connecting Goris and Kapan, which means we lost our main, the most reliable road to Iran. That means that some parts can be unreachable for humanitarian assistance, even from Iran. So, I mean, it's a very serious situation there. And getting back to the situation in Artsakh, if it was understandable, even on November 10, hours after the trilateral declaration was published, if it was clear that Artsakh situation is very dangerous, that it can be cut off, there can be serious problems. In 2 years, why didn't those in charge ever bothered about creating food supplies for, I don't know, for a 2-3 years long siege? Food supplies, weapon supplies, fuel supplies, etc., etc., medicine supplies. Why nothing was done? I mean, and that's my questions are addressed not only to Nikol Pashinyan and his cohort, but also to Artsakh government.
Yeah.
I mean, now they are demanding something from UN. Yeah, they are doing some protests, etc., etc., staging some protests. That's normal, that's understandable. But when I want to ask these people, why didn't you put any supplies knowing that you can be cut off at any second?
Right. Okay. And lastly, and my last question is related to Armenia's relations with Russia. 2 days ago, Armen Grigoryan, Armenia's National Security Council head, made a bombshell announcement on Armenian public TV, including that Russia is pressuring Armenia to join a union state with Russia and Belarus. He further said that Armenia's democracy and desire to stay sovereign has brought war closer to Armenia. Spokesperson for Putin, Dmitry Peskov, has denied this and called the statement provocative. I believe Maria Zakharova, the foreign ministry spokeswoman, has also followed up on that. Of course, during the same interview, Grigoryan also made some obvious lies. The EU monitors have not left Armenia. But why make such statements? What is your reaction to all of these sort of geopolitical statements that, for instance, Zakharova also said, is there any evidence of pressure, and what kind of pressure was it? And even if there was, why announce it on public TV?
In summer of 2021, before those elections, Karen Vrtanesyan, a political scientist, put it very well. He said that Nikol Pashinyan is trying to stay in power by instigating a geopolitical conflict in Armenia, by making Armenia a stage for geopolitical conflict between the West and Russia. And this is what we are seeing now, really. It looks to me, it looks like Nikol Pashinyan decided to go to instigate a conflict with Russians to get Western support. I don't see any other explanation to what he's doing now. Mm-hmm. Actually, very few, except for Belarus, no other countries on post-Soviet territory, no one openly supported Russia in their fight with Ukraine, right? So one thing that Armenian government could do was to just, shut up and wait, for example.
Right.
But Nikol Pashinyan is actively trying to instigate a conflict here with Russians. All their propaganda to their audiences, to also not Nikolakan audiences, but some more or less neutral audiences. It's all anti-Russian. This crisis, the Karabakh crisis, currently the blockade, they put it like, okay, it's just Russians. We don't have to do anything. It's only Russians.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say that it's Russia. It is because of Russians. Let's say. Then why were you taking out Armenian forces from Karabakh? Azerbaijan didn't do anything like that when there was 20,000 Armenians, 20,000 force in Karabakh, military force. Mm-hmm. First, they totally disintegrated that force. They took it out. They took out heavy weaponry, etc., etc. And then they are saying, okay, we are not responsible for anything. When Russian contingent, peacekeeping contingent, was sent to Karabakh, there was also about 20,000 Armenian force in Karabakh. You take them out and you say, okay, with this 3,000, provide the security you promised. It doesn't work like that. So I think they are instigating a conflict against Russia.
Okay. All right. Well, we are out of time, but I just want to remind our viewers and listeners that this interview and this set of interviews is a collaboration between the Groong podcast and 168 Hours. This is our last interview for the year, so I want to wish everyone on behalf of Groong and 168 a peaceful new year. I think that's the best we can wish for, but it's just a wish, to be honest, at this time. And also wanted to announce that a group of Artsakh youth who are stranded here in Yerevan are going to be spending the night at Yerevan in New Year's Eve, in case anyone is interested and watching. Thank you, Karen, thank you for joining us, and thank you for our viewers.
Thank you too.
Goodbye.